The ammonia hit me first, that sharp, overclean tang that always meant something was about to be wiped down or covered up. The sweat stink underneath told me who it belonged to. I stepped into the supervisor's office and saw Hal already seated, leaning back like he'd been waiting all morning to enjoy this. "Ava," he said, not bothering to look up from the file in front of him. "Just a routine check-in." "Yeah, and I was born yesterday." "My number's good?" I asked, stepping in. He shrugged. "Not the issue." I didn't sit. The room felt off, too polished, too quiet. The humming from the floor didn't reach in here, like they'd shut the whole world out for this little execution. Then he slid the envelope across the metal desk, cream-colored, thick. My name on it in handwriting, that wasn't his. "That's your final check," he said. "Plus 3 weeks. Standard. You're cleared out by noon." I stared at it for a second, didn't touch it, didn't blink. "Want a reason?" he asked, and there it was, that smirk. "We're moving in a different direction, fresh energy, but hey, don't worry, we own your references." "Before we start, how's your day going, and where are you joining from?" I could have flipped the table. I could have reminded him who kept line 4 from collapsing last winter, or how his pet project had fried a $30,000 sensor until I rewired it in 20 minutes. But I didn't. I reached out, picked up the envelope, and nodded once. "Appreciate the heads up." He blinked, caught off guard. "That's it?" "Guess so." What I didn't say was that this had nothing to do with fresh energy. They weren't scared of what I hadn't done. They were scared of what I had. I'd rebuilt the hydraulic reroute under their noses, rewired the torque assist module so it predicted line weight before the sensor even caught it. The system ran cleaner than anything they'd logged in 10 years, and none of them could explain how. That kind of control scares people who don't understand it, especially when it comes from someone they never bothered to promote. I turned, opened the door, and stepped into silence. No one looked at me, but I saw how they moved. Too busy, too still. Papers getting shuffled for no reason. A wrench dropped and not picked up. Except Jonah. Kid couldn't be more than 22, barely out of trade school. He glanced up from his station, eyes locked on mine. Then he gave me a single nod. Not pity, not fear, just respect. I nodded back and kept walking. I kept walking, straight to the back hall. No detours, no hesitation. Locker 119. Mine since day one. Hinges still squeaked even after I oiled them twice last month. I opened it and started grabbing. Sketches folded into quarters, corners soft from grease and time. My tool tags, 3 of them, 1 bent. Torque wrench, I bought myself after the company one started slipping readings. And the half-drunk lemon Gatorade I'd been nursing since Tuesday. Warm now, but I took a sip anyway. It tasted like metal and bad timing. No one came by, no curious glances, no fake sympathy. Just the hum of machines behind the walls, steady like they didn't know what was coming. I sat on the bench, pulled my phone, and tapped out 2 messages. First to legal, requesting confirmation of system ownership. Contributions made to hydraulic line B, torque loop assist, and live reroute diagnostics per internal logs. Ava R. Engineer ID 3269. Then to myself, a plain text outline. Unlogged improvements. Pressure balance loop in flow sector 2B, automated bypass logic in case of overload, early trip voltage tolerance module at junction 4. Nothing fancy, just cold facts. Time-stamped, sent. Next step. Wipe the machine logs. I walked to console 3, the diagnostics terminal, and keyed in my admin code. They hadn't pulled it yet. I backed up the error reports to a personal drive, then cleared my user data from the maintenance cache. Final task, unpair my badge from the punch clock. I scanned it one last time, went into settings, and deleted myself from the roster. The screen blinked. ID 3269, removed. And just like that, I didn't exist here anymore. I looked around once. The break room across the hall was empty. The floor bulletin still listed my name on 2 shifts this week. That'd be gone in minutes. No goodbyes, no farewell card with everyone's names misspelled, and a $10 gift card to Olive Garden. Just quiet. On my way out, I passed line 4. The conveyor rattled slightly, barely noticeable. I knew that sound. It was starting. They'd blame the hardware, maybe even Jonah, but it was deeper than that. It always was. I pushed open the side door. August heat wrapped around me like a curtain. The air outside smelled like dust and truck exhaust. I didn't look back. Quick note, Before listening, share which city or country you're watching from. By the time I hit the parking lot, I got the email ping from HR. Subject line, status update. I opened it. Your badge access has been revoked. Thank you for your service. Wishing you the best. Sure. Thanks. I sat in my truck for a second, let the engine idle. Then I pulled away, slow, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on that envelope from Hal. I didn't need to open it. I knew what was inside. A number, a weak apology, a reminder they thought this ended here. But they were wrong. They could shut me out of the system, delete my logs, pretend I never walked those halls. But they couldn't reverse what I'd built, because it was still running. Every fix I'd made, every reroute they didn't know existed. They'd copied the surface, not the soul. And when things started to buckle, they'd realize it wasn't code or metal that kept the line alive. It was me. I drove north, no destination, just road. My phone buzzed once, legal confirming they received my request. That was enough for now. As the plant shrank in the rear view, I didn't smile. I didn't cry either. I felt something quieter, like a switch flipping, a hum going silent. They'd wanted me gone. Clean slate, fresh energy. But they forgot something basic. You can't erase the ghost in the machine. I got home just before midnight, didn't bother with dinner, dropped the envelope on the counter, kicked off my boots, and crashed on the couch with my clothes still on. The next morning, I didn't check my phone. Didn't need to. Nothing I wanted to see. I sat there in the silence, holding a chipped black mug, steam curling from it. Strong coffee, no sugar, the kind that hits your chest like a punch. Sunlight spilled through the blinds and stripes, catching dust floating through the air. I watched it drift like slow sparks. Then I stood up and opened my laptop. Blank document, new file. Title bar just said resume, no fluff. No action verbs or HR-friendly filler, just the truth. Fixed, hydraulic reroute logic, line B. Rebuilt, torque trip module to predict mechanical load. Designed, failover pressure loop. Improved, conveyor response time by 43%. That was it. I didn't even write my last title. Didn't matter. It never matched the work anyway. Then I opened a new tab and made a fresh email. Not Gmail, too noisy. I used an old domain and registered something that felt like mine. rmachines@techrunner.net AR Ava Rains. But also a quiet nod to my grandfather, Albert Rains, retired diesel tech, used to say machines don't lie, only people do. He taught me to rebuild a carburetor before I could drive. Kept a tool belt in his living room, like other men kept photo albums. That afternoon, I threw together a one-page site. No photos, no company bio, just a bullet list. On-site troubleshooting, robotic alignment flow system, optimization. No contracts, no fluff, just answers. Didn't advertise. Just dropped the link on a couple niche forums where actual engineers hung out, the kind who'd rather solder than talk. By the end of the week, I had 2 gigs lined up. One shop out in Dayton needed help with robotic arm drift, too much swing at high RPMs. Another warehouse in Lexington had belt speeds all over the place. Cheap sensors, bad math. I packed my tools and drove out. No one asked for my resume, they just watched me work. I rebalanced the drift with a low-pass filter in the firmware and reprogrammed the belt loop's control timer by hand. The fixes weren't pretty, but they worked. And they were mine. No daily check-ins, no stupid review cycles or senior management trying to make themselves sound useful. Just broken systems and someone who knew how to listen to them. 2 weeks in, I got a call from Marvin, old floor lid back at the plant, voice like gravel and cheap cigars. They're struggling, he said. Production's off. You know that reroute you put in on 4? Yeah. They don't. I waited. QC flagged 7 returns in one day. Machines are choking. They pulled 3 engineers off the line trying to trace it, but none of them can find the logic path. I didn't say anything. Just thought you'd want to know, he added, and then he hung up. Next day, another text. Tamir, old tech from night shift. They tried resetting the flow regulators, jammed harder. Line 3's offline for the 2nd time this week. I just stared at the message. Didn't answer, didn't need to. I wasn't rooting for failure, but I wasn't going to fix it either. They built their house on sand, pulled the foundation out, and expected the roof to stay up. It never works that way. I cracked open a notebook and started drafting out a new module, something I'd been thinking about for months. Voltage spike compensation logic, smarter than what the OEMs shipped. Tight, fast-reacting, fault-tolerant. I didn't even know where I'd use it yet. Didn't matter. It felt good to build something that didn't need approval. I poured another cup of coffee. The dust still floated in the light, same as it had that morning. But the air felt different now, cleaner. They could jam their machines all they wanted. Let them drown in their own confusion. I wasn't going back. I was building forward. I was halfway through calibrating a motion sensor array on a packaging rig in Cincinnati when I saw the post. Anyone else's belts tripping under low load? Forum handle looked like some junior. New account, 2 total posts. Profile picture of a half-assembled motor. I clicked. Thread was buried on a mid-level maintenance board, the kind where people go when they've already made 5 wrong guesses and don't want to look stupid to their supervisor. The second post hit harder. Weirdest flow root config I've ever seen. Attached was a photo. Grainy, low res, but I'd know that layout anywhere. Sector 2. B. Reroute coil turned horizontal, with the pressure relief nested between 2 junction plates I'd custom fitted myself. It wasn't in the manual, wasn't in the CAD system either. I'd done it at 2 a.m. on a double shift when the plant couldn't afford another day of downtime. They never asked how it started working again, just kept clocking production numbers and patting themselves on the back. I scrolled through the replies. A few guesses, sensor misfire, gear misalignment, low torque driver. No one got it right. I didn't post, just closed the tab and kept working. The jams were back. They didn't know it yet, not fully, but the quiet unravel had started. 3 days later, another thread popped up. Different user this time, looked like a mid-level tech. Anyone know the logic path for auto pressure redirect during spike events? Diagrams say one thing, machine does another. I opened the image. It was my machine again, line 4. They'd run a diagnostic and found a ghost loop. Nothing in the logs, but the flow valves weren't acting like the blueprint. No wonder, the blueprint was wrong. I'd bypassed the voltage sensor entirely, fed the relay through an inverted override I patched together with scrap from another unit. It worked, better than OEM, but it was mine. And now it was failing, because they didn't know how to maintain it. Then the email started. First one came from some no-name floor manager, probably new. Subject line, quick question, system notes? No greeting. Just a paragraph asking if I remembered how the second line's backflow system was originally calibrated. The word originally did a lot of work there. I didn't answer. Next day, 2 more. One from QC, the other from some admin. The tone changed, polite, curious, pretending it was all just background info. We'd love your insight. Trying to retrace the logic. Do you recall why Sector 4 has double redundancies? They still couldn't say it. Couldn't admit the system worked better than anything they'd had before, and they didn't know how or why. I closed my laptop and stepped outside. The sky was that late August gray, thick and heavy, but I could hear cicadas screaming in the trees, the kind of noise that sounds like the world trying to shake something off. A neighbor waved. I nodded back. Inside, my phone buzzed again. Another message. Hey, just a heads up. There's a buyer doing a walkthrough at the plant this week. Big name. Rumor is they're prepping for acquisition. It was Tamir. They're trying to get the numbers back up before the audit. But the jamming's worse now. Line 2 failed hard yesterday. I didn't reply. Just stared at the message until the screen dimmed. A high-stakes buyer walking into that mess? They must have cleaned the place top to bottom, faked stability for a few hours, reset logs, maybe even shut the lines down for routine maintenance. But it wouldn't matter. You can't patch a system you don't understand. You can only hide the cracks for so long before the whole thing shifts. Later that night, I checked the forum again. New post. This one tagged under unexplained flow behavior. Pressure loop seems inverted under load. Sensors not matching relay response. Can't trace the logic tree. One reply. Legacy mod? That word again. Legacy? As if the fix was old or irrelevant. Number. It wasn't legacy. It was live. Still running. Still holding the whole thing together. Barely. I clicked off the screen and stared at my workbench. Spools of wiring. A half-disassembled torque sensor. Notes scribbled on scrap cardboard from a shipping box. No one here to question me. No one rewriting my designs into some sanitized team effort. They wanted to erase me. But every time that line jammed, every time they tripped a relay they couldn't explain, the system whispered the truth. I wasn't gone. I was embedded. The workshop lights flickered again. Second time that night, I'd meant to rewire the overheads a week ago, but hadn't bothered. They buzzed with that faint electrical whine, the sound of circuits straining under weak current. Familiar, it was past 2 in the morning. Tools scattered across the bench. My hands smelled like WD-40 and old steel. I was sketching something on the back of a torn instruction sheet when my phone lit up. Unknown number, not spam. The preview stopped me cold. Were you pushed or did you walk? I stared at it for a few seconds, then tapped it open. Mason. Last time I saw him was 5 years ago. Trade event in Louisville. I'd demoed the hydraulic reroute patch live, off a portable rig I'd thrown together from warehouse scraps. Most people barely looked up from their coffee. Mason didn't blink once. When I'd finished, he walked straight over and said, "You're one of the few who actually sees how the machines think." He wasn't wrong. I never saw wires and pipes. I saw rhythm, flow. When something jammed, it wasn't failure. It was the system trying to tell you it couldn't breathe. I hadn't heard from him since, until now. I didn't answer. Another message came through 10 minutes later. Acquisition teams noticing logic gaps in your old system. They're not happy. So that's what this was. Not a check-in, not nostalgia. Confirmation, word had reached him. The logic holes, the ghost circuits, the fail-safe no one could trace. And whoever was kicking tires at the plant was asking why $1 million line was held together by something no one could explain. I set the phone down and leaned back. Across the bench, the prototype rig I'd been working on blinked steadily. Blue LED pulsing, just alive enough to remind me it was waiting. Another buzz. Different number this time, local. I almost didn't check it. They're calling the jam legacy issues. No name attached, but I knew the tone. It was Paul, one of my old line supervisors. He was careful with words, always. Legacy issues was a code phrase. It meant they know the system's broken, but no one's admitting why. So now they were spinning, blaming ghosts. That's the thing with systems. Once they slip out of your hands, you can't fake control for long. The rhythm breaks. The machine starts fighting itself. And eventually, even the suits notice. But I didn't reply. Not to Mason, not to Paul. I just watched the lights flicker overhead and listened to the hum of the bench rig. There was nothing to say. They'd ripped me out like I was a problem to erase. Now the holes were showing, and the silence I left behind was louder than anything I could have said. A screw rolled off the edge of the bench and clattered to the floor. I didn't move, just let it sit there. They were calling it legacy, but I wasn't done, not even close. The bench rig blinked steady. I let it run. I didn't need to touch it. Everything important was already in motion somewhere else. 3 days later, Mason walked into the plant. I didn't see it, but I heard from someone who did. Floor tech named Elena, used to shadow me on night shifts. She messaged just one word. He's here. The acquisition audit was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp. They were already rattled before he walked in. Machines misfiring, jam rates up, logs half-wiped but not convincingly. You can't clean panic out of a system once it's rooted. Mason was calm, clipboard in hand, dark gray polo, no tie. Didn't smile, didn't shake hands, just moved through the plant like a surgeon prepping for incision. They gave him a packet, efficiency stats, uptime charts, flow metrics, all cherry-picked, all fake. But Mason didn't need graphs. He watched how the machines moved. The pause before a belt kicked in, the staggered torque, the missing rhythm. He noticed. Then he opened the access roster. My name wasn't on it, not even grayed out, just gone. He asked to see the old logs. HR hesitated. That's when he saw the internal flag. Access revoked. Departure involuntary. That's where it stopped. Mason stood up straight, turned to the room full of VPs, managers, and a couple of marketing idiots pretending to be engineers. "Who designed your bypass flow logic for the hydraulic regulators?" he asked. Silence. You could hear the coolant pumps whining through the wall. Finally, the plant VP cleared his throat. His name was Doug. Polished hair. Fake laugh. Thought buzzwords could fix machines. That system was a group effort. Mason didn't blink. Then Jennifer spoke. Former head of floor operations. I'd seen her fight for overtime cuts like she was defending a budget made of gold. It was Ava Raines, she said. Quiet, but clear. She built that logic loop herself. Off schedule, on her own time. Mason nodded once. Was she consulted before this audit? No one answered. He looked around the table, waited a full 10 seconds, long enough to make them squirm. Then he pushed his chair back and stood. "You fired your only real asset," he said. "We're pausing this deal." Doug sat up straighter. "Wait, Mason, we can clarify?" "No," Mason said, cutting him off. "I don't need clarification. I needed stability, intelligence, a system that thinks." He held up the packet. "This is noise." Another exec started scrambling, flipping through a binder. "We've updated some of the flow paths since." Mason was already walking toward the door. They tried to follow. He didn't stop. At the threshold, he paused and turned. "You should have kept her." Then he left. Elena said no one moved for a full minute, just stared at the door like it had swallowed their bonus checks. They tried to salvage it, called the buyer's reps, sent follow-up emails, booked a second, informal walkthrough. But the air was different now, heavy, off balance. Mason didn't respond, and neither did I. They had their chance. I'd given them a system that ran cleaner than anything they'd ever managed on their own. Held it together without manuals, without approvals, without fanfare. I'd asked for nothing but space to work. They gave me a shove and a threat. Now they were left with broken flow paths, an audit trail full of red flags, and a name they couldn't even bring themselves to say out loud. I got another message that night, from someone I didn't recognize. "Heard Mason walked mid-audit. You okay?" I didn't reply. I just sat in the dark with the bench lights flickering soft blue and a wrench still warm in my hand. The machine next to me purred. Tight alignment, flow dialed in, no guesswork. Out there, they were still chasing ghosts. In here, I was building something that made sense. The next morning, my inbox dinged with a message that had no sender name, just a subject line. "Confidential technical advisory request." The body was bare, no signature, no small talk. Just, "Need clarification on reroute logic during mid-load reversal. Priority? Critical." It didn't say who it was from, but I knew. Mason didn't waste words when the machine was on fire. I left the message unread. I made coffee, flipped on the fan in the workshop, and went back to the voltage override I'd been sketching. But the hum wasn't right. Not in the room. Not in my chest. 2 hours later, another came in. "Do you have your notes from Line 2's torque override module? Our flow models are misfiring." Then another. "Backflow isolation isn't working like the diagram says. Need your input." They just kept stacking. "Hey, can we talk? Any chance you remember how the auxiliary loop engaged on overload? Please call me." None of them mentioned what really mattered. No one said, "We screwed up." No one said my name. Because if they said my name, they'd have to admit I was the one holding the whole thing together to begin with. So I didn't respond. Instead, I watched the fallout. An old tech friend forwarded me an internal memo. Line 3 offline indefinitely. Line 1 flagged for manual monitoring. Flow mapping inconsistencies across every shift. A screenshot showed a whiteboard full of arrows, red marker all over it, with the words, "Unexplained feedback loop," underlined twice. That afternoon, someone forwarded a clip from a webinar. One of their junior engineers was on it, stammering through a presentation. Charts behind him glitched mid-slide. He cut the feed halfway through. Then I checked LinkedIn. Hal, the same director who slid that envelope across the desk with a smirk, was just gone. Profile deactivated. No goodbye post. No announcements. Another contact messaged me. "She's on leave." That's the word going around. Except there was no trail, no new job, no email, no public exit. Just vanished. Funny how fast people disappear when the machine stops covering for them. I opened my email again, scrolled past the begging, past the sudden politeness, past the panic. The original message from Mason sat at the bottom. Still no signature, still waiting. I didn't need to think hard about it. They had their shot. They chose branding and politics over logic, titles over truth. Cut out the person who actually listened to the machine and prayed no one would notice the silence. Now the silence was all they had. I looked at my bench, my prototype, the system I was building, clean from scratch, no lies welded into the frame. No one second-guessing decisions they couldn't begin to understand. But still, I knew how this worked. Sometimes, even a broken system needs a pulse to shock it back to life. Not to save it, but to watch it burn the right way. I opened a reply window, typed 2 words, "Let's talk." The conference room was all glass and silence. Top floor, clean lines. Everything polished down to the chrome door handle. Mason stood near the window, arms crossed. The other man, older silver suit, calm eyes, sat at the head of the table, tablet in front of him. No laptop, no assistant. CEO energy without the noise. I didn't shake hands, just sat, opened my laptop, and plugged in. No intro slides, no mission statement, just a stripped-down SIM window with a gray background and blinking grid. Watch, I said, and ran the model. The hydraulic line filled in blue, pressure hitting 82%. I triggered the overload. Instead of tripping, the flow rerouted mid-cycle. No pause, no spike. The loop balanced itself and dumped excess load into a ghost sector I'd built purely from timing offsets. The line kept running. No hiccup. Mason nodded slowly. The CEO leaned forward, fingers steepled. "How long did it take you to build this?" he asked. 2 weeks, but I've had the logic in my head for months. I rewound the SIM, then isolated the failsafe module. "This is the trick," I said. "The voltage spike hits, and the sensors don't know whether to flag or wait. Most systems freeze. Mine fakes a delayed ping, gives the controller just enough false calm to let the bypass engage." He raised an eyebrow. "You lie to the machine?" I shook my head. "Number, I let the machine lie to itself just long enough to survive." He didn't respond. Just watched the SIM loop again. The tension was tight but quiet, not doubt, just wait, like they finally understood the system was never about wires or specs. It was about instinct. When I closed the SIM, the CEO reached into a folder beside him and slid a document across the table. Pre-signed, clean header, Vice President of Mechanical Operations. Terms, full autonomy, build the systems I wanted, hire who I trusted, report to no one but him, no NDA, no silence clause, no ownership games. I stared at it, then looked back up. "One condition," I said. "Name it." "No press," I said. "No glory. No interviews. No look who we hired article." Mason let out a short breath, maybe relief, maybe approval. The CEO nodded once. "Done." I read the offer top to bottom, every line, then signed it. No handshake, no photo, just ink on paper. And something in my chest eased, like a belt tension finally gave and clicked into place. They sat with me another 5 minutes, asked a few smart questions about stability cycles and failure windows. Nothing performative, just real interest. Then they let me go. Back in the elevator, Mason stepped in beside me. "Quiet ride, 20 floors down." At the lobby, before the doors opened, he said, "They still think you're coming back to clean up the mess." I turned to him. "I'm not," I said. "I'm building something they don't get to touch." He didn't nod, didn't smile, just pressed the door button and let it open. Outside, the city was loud again. Cars, wind, asphalt heat. But in my head, everything was silent, just clean logic. 2 days later, Mason sat across from Doug in the same plant conference room where they'd once tried to erase me. Doug was sweating before the projector even warmed up. The buyer's CEO sat silent, arms crossed, eyes fixed on Doug like a man deciding whether to buy a house already on fire. Doug clicked through his deck, voice shaky. "She was one of many contributors. All systems here were built through collaborative." Mason cut in without looking at him, just leaned toward the CEO and said 5 words. "She wrote every critical line." That was it. No debate, no second pitch, no polite exit. The CEO stood, closed the folder in front of him, and walked out. Deal dead, room dead silent. Doug didn't move. Mason grabbed his jacket. On his way out, he paused at the door, turned just enough to catch Doug's eye. "You fired a name," he said. "She was the foundation." Then he left him there, standing in the wreckage of his own lie. Meanwhile, I sat at my new desk. No plaques, no fake flowers, just a flat workspace, open notebook, and a hardcover on industrial design open to a dog-eared page. The light came in clean through the window, warm and sharp across the table. I sipped my coffee, no rush. The hum of the lab in the next room was the only sound. Then my phone buzzed. One message. "He looked like the floor vanished." Tamir, no context needed. I could see it. Doug, pale, lost, realizing too late he'd built his whole reputation on top of something he didn't understand. I didn't reply, didn't smile, didn't gloat. Just let the message sit there on the screen. Because I didn't need to burn anything down. I just walked away. And gravity did the rest.